Hello and welcome to Football League World TV. My name is Ned Holmes and this is The Debate Show. I'm currently sitting just about a mile away from the Den, and it's their inhabitants that are our focus today as we ask, should Millwall sell Jed Wallace in January? It's going to be a controversial one, no doubt, and to break down the issue, I'm joined by two of my Football League World colleagues, Adam Jones and Ben Wignall. Ben, first of all, how are you doing today, mate?
Very good. Yeah, I've had a busy evening and morning with my club, PNE. Lots of stuff going on, but looking forward to talking about a player who's been in the Championship for a while and who could be, getting his long-deserved move to the Premier League.
Absolutely. Adam, I imagine a slightly quieter evening and morning for you, but how are you getting on?
Yeah, not too bad. I think I had my year's worth of excitement when we signed Andy Carroll, so I'll take that, and I think I'll move with it. But no, this is probably one of the biggest questions, the $1 million question that you're asking today. Should Millwall sell Jed Wallace? So yeah, I'm excited to get into it.
Absolutely. Well, before we get started, as always, just a reminder to like the video on YouTube and subscribe to Football League World TV on YouTube if you haven't already. And finally, of course, to get your comments, your questions in, because this is the debate show and we really do want to hear from you. So Jed Wallace, then, there's certainly an argument to be made that no player in the Championship's been sort of more integral, more talismanic to their club in recent years than Wallace has been to Millwall. Joined originally on loan from Wolves and signed permanently in July 2017. He's gone on to score 41 goals and provide 42 assists and 242 appearances since. And while, Ben, those sort of stats are impressive, they don't quite do justice just how important he is to the club, do they?
Yeah, no, I think he's almost, synonymous with the club now after being there for over 4 years. I think if you do say to any Championship fan, who do you think is the most important Millwall player, you will say Jed Wallace, because he's no doubt done to any person's club a goal or assist over the years, or done something to change the game. I think he's almost kind of irreplaceable in a way. I know in the recent weeks he's not really contributed in terms of goals and goals and assists, but I think he's a lot more than that. He's a good presser off the ball. He gives a lot of energy, and his delivery is second to none. Normally, he's one of the best wingers in the Championship, which is why we're obviously talking about what we are today. But I think for a club like Millwall, who've not reached the Premier League yet and who are kind of aspiring to be there without having the kind of budget of the top teams, he's definitely a player, that's of the quality of the top end Championship, lower end Premier League, but who you could also say that kind of maybe has the loyalty to stick around the club, who are trying to make something happen.
Absolutely. Adam, coming to you then, what is it for you that you think makes Jed Wallace such an important player for Millwall?
I think it's just the fact that he's probably their main kind of creative and goal scoring outlet. I think over the past few years he's been so consistent in the past few seasons, and I think that's why he's so important, is because they can rely on him. Millwall are known as a team that are quite solid defensively, but going forward they maybe lack a few ideas, and the fact that Jed Wallace has been so reliable in recent years has allowed them to kind of remain solid defensively. I kind of compare them to Derby County in a way, because they're remaining solid at the back, but they didn't have this season, but they didn't have very much going forward. And I think Millwall, with Jed Wallace, it supplies them with just about enough going forward to remain kind of solid defensively and getting that balance between attacking and defending. So they've been able to remain solid because he's been so reliable up front. As Ben said, with his deliveries, he can take a fantastic free kick as well, create something out of nothing with those free kicks, really, and get a goal out of nowhere, which I think is so important, with a side like Millwall that don't always create the very, best opportunities. And I kind of, in a way, also compare him to Lewis Grabban at Nottingham Forest. They might be solid defensively, Nottingham Forest, but they look to a main man in Grabban to kind of get the goals. And that's kind of similar with Jed Wallace at Millwall. So he is a very important figure in there. And that's why it'll be hard to kind of sever ties with him if they eventually do.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, certainly a talismanic figure and an important one to this sort of morale of the whole side. I was at the Den sort of recently when he came back from injury, and his presence on the pitch sort of buoyed the rest of the team. Obviously, in recent years, Millwall have been sort of lacking that consistent number 9, and that's been an issue, and Wallace has sort of papered over the cracks of, as it were. But this season, you know, five goals, 5 assists again this term. But there's an argument to be made, isn't there, Ben, that he's sort of perhaps this year got more backup than he has in recent years. Afobe and Bradshaw, I think, both have 4 goals now, and Shea Ojo hasn't quite clicked for him yet, but is certainly a quality player. So, you know, beyond, I guess, Wallace, in Gary Rowett's squad, there are options now that perhaps in recent years they haven't had that quality up top.
Yeah, there is, and I think the main addition of Benik Afobe has probably helped him out a little bit. He's got that championship class. He's not obviously shown it consistently over recent years, and I know he had a loan spell in Turkey that didn't quite work out, but coming back to his home in London has probably helped Afobe and probably helped bring out Wallace's quality again. Bradshaw coming back into form recently as well. I know he's not had a great time goal scoring in the last few years, but he's certainly kind of finding his feet again at championship level. And like I say, Shea Ojo, he's a talent who's not quite clicked yet, but when he eventually gets going, you think that's another player who can, you know, provide the goals and assists that can add to Wallace's. You know, I think he's on the right track, Wallace, if he does stay for the rest of the season, to get his, you know, 10 goal, 10 assist kind of season. I know a lot of those came in the early month or two of this campaign, and he's slowed off a little bit, but he's been playing through the middle. He's been playing out wide. I know he played up front a little bit last season, so he's doing a job. He can do a job anywhere in like, you know, the attacking positions. And I think even when you've got Matt Smith coming off the bench occasionally, that's someone that Wallace can target with his set pieces. So, you know, there's definitely options around him that are helping him, and that's why I think Millwall don't lose many games, because they do have these attacking outlets. Not only have a solid defence, but they have these new outlets now that Wallace can provide for.
Absolutely. We'll move on sort of next to talk a bit more about his contract situation, the interest from other clubs, and the options really out there for Millwall. But just a reminder, you know, any Millwall fans that are watching, or just fans of the EFL in general, we want to hear your thoughts on whether Millwall should look to sell Jed Wallace in January. Now, under usual circumstances, obviously, you know, cashing in on a player of Jed Wallace's importance isn't something that you feel Millwall would probably consider midway through this season. But of course, Wallace is out of contract in the summer, and our sources at Football League World revealed a few months ago that it was looking increasingly difficult for them to convince him to agree new terms. That sort of agreement certainly doesn't seem to be looking likely before January, if at all, this season. Adam, is there any way you can see him signing a new contract at the Den before the end of the current campaign?
I think for me, it'll be one kind of that he signs at the end of the campaign as opposed to in the middle of it. I think when he has more certainty over Millwall's league status and where they're going to be next season, and, you know, how they're shaping up, I think then he'll either decide to stay or go. So it'll be kind of, it'll be quite a nervy situation, I think, for Millwall fans if they don't cash in on him in January and get some certainty. In saying that, I didn't expect Lewis O'Brien at Huddersfield or Matt Grimes at Swansea to sign a new deal. I thought they were fantastic assets at their clubs. I thought they would move on at some point with their kind of expiring contract. I know that Huddersfield had the option with O'Brien, but nonetheless, it was a real surprise to see him sign new terms. So I think for me, I think I could see him signing a new deal. I think it very much depends on the terms. If there is a release clause in there, like I think there is with O'Brien, I think he could potentially sign a new deal. And considering that Millwall probably haven't been the biggest spenders in recent years, they don't strike me as the biggest spenders, definitely not in the Championship anyway. You know, they could potentially invest a little bit more into, you know, a new deal for him and a bumper contract, which he could sign with that release clause. And that could work in that way. So it's definitely not impossible to see him signing a new contract, but obviously it will also depend on the intense, you know, whether the links intensify or not, and which clubs are involved in kind of, you know, that are interested in him and that are monitoring him at this moment in time, because he won't, you know, stay away from the news. I don't think he'll firmly look at who he's been linked to and see the interest that's surrounding him at the moment. So it's not impossible, but obviously it's going to be difficult.
Absolutely. And Ben Wallace himself said earlier in the season that it was his dream to get Millwall promoted to the Premier League. Is that the only way you can see him being at the Den beyond this summer, or do you think we could see him back in the Championship with Millwall next season?
I don't think anything can be ruled out at this stage. I think we've seen Millwall don't lose many games, which means they're always probably going to be in that, playoff chasing pack until a certain point. I do feel, in my personal opinion, it might tail off by the end of the season, regardless of what they do in January and regardless of what happens to Wallace. But I just think it may be a bit too big a risk to wait until the end of the season to see what he wants to do and see where they are. I mean, I think there's no doubt there will be interest in January in him. And I just think that he might think in his mind he does deserve a shot at the Premier League after what he's done at Championship level. We've seen players go up with their teams or get signed from the Championship and do well in the Premier League. And I think that, he's been very coy about it, in interviews, just saying he'll leave it to his agent. And the fact that we're getting so close to January and nothing's happened yet does make me feel as though something may happen in January. But I just don't see right now Millwall get into the Premier League this season. Whether they'd make some more additions next season, I think they'd have to keep Wallace around for that to happen. But yeah, I think the only way Wallace stays beyond the end of the season is like Adam said, maybe a release clause, maybe a bumper pay rise to convince him to stay around, because I've just got no. I think that there's going to be Premier League teams trying to turn his head in January.
Absolutely. Well, next we're going to move on to talk about some of those teams that might be interested in January and sort of Millwall's options there. But just a reminder, of course, if you are a Millwall fan or any EFL fan watching, to sort of have your say in the comments, because we really do want to hear from you on the debate show. Our Football League World exclusive back in September revealed that Celtic, Rangers, Newcastle and West Ham were among the sides interested in Wallace ahead of the January window. Obviously, if his contract were to run down, Millwall wouldn't be able to get anything for him in the summer. That they'd see him walk away for free. That would certainly be a blow, given his importance to the club. But Ben, how much could you see really them sort of getting for him in January if they were to agree to cash in? How much do you think he's worth to them?
It's tough to say, though. The contract situation, means that Millwall aren't exactly in a strong position. I think we'll talk about in a minute. Other clubs can approach him on a pre-contract. Certain clubs that are being linked. Just being in January, would 5 million be a realistic valuation? I don't know if it might be stretching it or not with 6 months left on his deal. Definitely Premier League clubs who are lacking a little bit of creativity halfway through the season that'll probably be a cheap price for them. And I think there'll certainly be a few that might be looking at him who are down the bottom of the table. But I think if there's anywhere in the region of 5 million, I think Millwall have got to consider it, for their long-term strategy as well. They could reinvest that in new contracts, new players, maybe trying to get a 4B on a permanent deal. So certainly something in that range I'd be considering. But if it's only bids of 1 or 2 million, I know his contract situation isn't great, but that's not something I'd be looking to accept if I was Millwall. So if anything in the region of 5 million is something that, as a Millwall fan, I'd definitely consider as a fair price for someone who's not only a talent but someone who's running down with the contract.
Absolutely. You certainly wouldn't rule out it being sort of one of those situations where Millwall's valuation is a lot higher than those clubs chasing in, just because of what it would mean to them to lose him in comparison to what he might be worth in the rest of the market, given his contract situation and everything like that. And given the money Newcastle will likely to have to spend in January, you'd think perhaps they would be looking to be a bit more ambitious than signing a player, an untested player in the Premier League, like the Millwall winger. But Eddie Howe is reportedly keen on Tyrese Campbell from Stoke City. So perhaps he will be looking to raid the EFL for talent. Do you think even after that big money takeover that Wallace could still be on sort of Newcastle's radar?
Yeah, I think he could be. I think he could be a decent squad player. I'm not sure. It's hard to judge what Newcastle are going to do in the January transfer window. It feels like they could spend a huge amount of money, and there seems to be noises coming from St James's Park that's going to happen. But you've got to remember as well that Eddie Howe has spent so much time in the EFL, and he may want a couple of players, from there to help him. So I know that he's been linked with a couple of his players when he first arrived. I think Lloyd Kelly was one of those linked with a move there. So it wouldn't be a massive surprise to see them kind of make a bid for him. But I think we'll soon see what happens with Newcastle and their intentions as soon as the January window opens and as soon as the links start to heat up, because it could go one way or the other really for Newcastle. They could be more pragmatic, or they could be he could spend a huge amount of money. I think for Wallace, I think it would be a bit of a waste because there's always the chance that they are going to spend a huge amount of money, if not in the January, then in the summer. And I think if you're looking at Premier League teams, I think for me it'd have to be West Ham United. I think Jarrod Bowen has shown that you can get an opportunity at West Ham, even if you're from the EFL, and the fact that they're in Europe as well. And David Moyes will want to utilise his squad to its full advantage and and to the maximum, really, to make sure that they're maintaining the results in the Premier League. So we could get a couple of games in Europe, which will be an absolute dream for him. Maybe next season, or if not, then maybe in the January. But there's definitely scope for him to play in Europe and to play regularly for West Ham. So for me, I think that would be a much better option than Newcastle United. And I think other than Celtic or Rangers, I think it would be a better option for him to go to West Ham. I don't think he'd really go to any other Scottish Premiership side, maybe in Aberdeen or a Hearts, but I'm not sure really apart from that. So yeah, I think at the moment, apart with all the names that stick out, I think it's going to be West Ham for me.
Absolutely, it's certainly an option to sort of join in what David Moyes is doing there, but perhaps not the most popular amongst Millwall fans to see him make that move. Ben, you touched upon the pre-contract situation. Obviously, the Scottish clubs, Celtic and Rangers, who we've heard are interested, they are able in January to sign him on a pre-contract. Do you think that's something that would really appeal to him, or do you think he might feel that the Premier League is within touching distance and it's worth sort of waiting to see really the lay of the land and whether a Premier League move is open to him?
I think it's worth considering both sides. I think there's only a certain amount of or number of Premier League teams who may take him. I think it'll be a small sample, like your Newcastles, your Burnleys, who are looking perhaps to boost their talent out wide. Whereas, Celtic and Rangers have always proved to be a good stepping stone to, bigger things. I mean, for younger players in the early 20s especially, but I know Wallace is 27 now and, in his peak year, so it's a little bit different for him. But you've got to think, if Rangers or Celtic are interested, that normally automatically brings European football, it brings big crowds, and that's something that Wallace might want to experience before he's gets to that stage of his career where he's not playing at the level he is now. So if Celtic and Rangers are still interested in, obviously they can offer a pre-contract agreement. I think that's something which will definitely be on his mind and something that will definitely be considered. But I think Celtic look to be targeting, a few Japanese-based players with Ange Postecoglou managing over there previously, and Rangers, that could be an interesting destination. I've got a lot of attacking players or wide players who, are fighting for places. So maybe, don't know if Wallace is just walking. I think it'd be a really big battle for him to go into either club and get a start. But don't think it's going to be easy either way. He needs to, force his way into a Premier League team as well if that move happens. So I think all options on the table, but certainly Celtic and Rangers would be a very attractive move for someone like Wallace, I think.
Absolutely, and as you say, all options on the table as we head towards January, and it certainly looks likely to be a sort of EFL transfer saga that sort of drags through the month. And as we've said before, any sort of EFL or Millwall fans watching, please do get your comments in, your sort of questions or suggestions whether you think Millwall should sell Jed Wallace in January. Turning our attention back to the Championship club, then they're 8th in the table right now. I think it's 4 points back from the top 6 at the moment. Adam, there's a sort of strong argument to be made that this is their best chance to challenge for promotion for some time, and that as Ben mentioned, losing Wallace might perhaps make it a less enticing place to go, make recruitment harder in the future for them. So in that sense, do you think they really need to be holding on to him to sort of keep that playoff challenge alive? Because this seems like such a unique chance for them to sort of launch that playoff push.
I think they do have to keep him if they want to stage a promotion push. But there's a difference between a push and actually getting in there. And I think it will be extremely difficult for them to get in the top 6. I want them to prove me wrong. But you look at the likes of QPR and West Brom that look like dead certs to be in there at the moment in the playoff zone. And I'm looking also at some of those teams that are outside at the moment. The likes of Middlesbrough under Chris Wilder, been given a new lease of life, really. Neil Warnock left the club in a decent state, and then Chris Wilder's kind of taken it on. You look at Sheffield United, that are doing pretty well under Paul Heckingbottom at the moment, and even, with maybe managerial limitations, I think they've got a decent number of players in there and a decent amount of squad depth in certain areas, and definitely have the resources to get into the top 6. But a lot of people may have kind of slated Heckingbottom's appointment, but he's seems to have changed the mood and it's got them really on the front foot. So fair play to him for that. I'm not sure how long that's going to last, but it will be interesting to see. And you also have to have a look at Nottingham Forest as well, under a man of Steve Cooper's managerial kind of quality, getting Swansea City to the playoffs, in consecutive seasons. He'll want to be there as well for Swansea, and he seems to have created a real feel-good factor at the City ground as well. So I'm thinking those 3 teams, along with the likes of West Bromwich Albion and QPR, that stick out for me. It'll be a really tough task for them. So for me, keeping hold of him would give them a chance, and their solid defence kind of gives them that real chance. But whether they haven't enough going forward, even with Wallace, I'm not 100% sure. Obviously, they've got a Phobe who can do a good job, but it's going to be very difficult, I think, regardless of whether they keep him or not. So it's definitely one for them to weigh up. I don't think they're favourites, and as Ben said, I think at some point they will kind of, their kind of hopes will fizzle out at some point, but still, a mid-table finish will be respectable. But obviously, after finishing, I think it was 11th last season, they'll want to push up and keep on improving and getting to the playoffs.
Absolutely. Ben, you talked about earlier the potential for Millwall to look to, use that, let's say it was 4 or 5 million to reinvest it in the squad. Do you think, to that end, do you think it's a possibility that Millwall could lose Jed Wallace and still keep their playoff challenge on track by sort of recruiting a replacement, or do you think that sort of reinvestment is got to be sort of more long term?
No, I think they could end up being, in and around the playoffs even if they lose him. I mean, I think in recent seasons, I think they've relied on him a lot too much to try and get those results. But I think, like we touched on earlier, I think the goals have been spread around a bit more often now, and they're not always coming from his deliveries as well. So I think losing him wouldn't be the end of the world. I think it might have been a bit more of a blow last season or the season before. And if you can get some money for him, even better. Obviously, losing him on a free will be devastating because they won't have got the recoup of the transfer fee or profit that they deserve for his development. But I definitely think they can get a few replacements in if they get enough money from him and, keep the same level of quality in the squad, if not better it. think Gary Rowett's been around long enough to be a smart recruiter of players. He brought a Forbay in the summer when, you know, others might have not looked at him because of his wages at Stoke, and, you know, he seems to be doing well. And the likes of Dan Ballard have come in from Arsenal and done well at the back. So I think you've got to trust Rowett if Wallace does end up leaving and they do cash in on him, because I think he could probably find a player that maybe not as good as Wallace, but that'll be very hard to find at championship level. But I think if they do lose him, I think they'll be able to recruit a decent enough replacement, and perhaps one that's younger and has a lot more upside.
We'll move to sort of the final section of the debate show then, and I'm going to be asking you both in a second for your verdicts on whether Millwall should sell Jed Wallace in January. Adam, coming to you first. Everything we've considered over the last 25 minutes or so, if you're in that Millwall boardroom and you know that there's interest in Jed Wallace in January, well, what are you doing?
Well, every player has a price. I'm a firm believer in that. If they get a ridiculous offer with 6 months on his contract, then I think they have to let him go, you know, and then reinvest, because I think that might be beneficial to them in the long term. But if they do cash in on him, then they need to start creating a contingency plan, not in January, but now. Because if they don't, then I think they can do well and adapt reasonably well. But you know, not having a plan in place to kind of replace him in the January window could be quite detrimental in the short term. Obviously, they can take great encouragement from Blackburn Rovers, and the fact that they adapted quite well without Adam Armstrong. You know, Ben Brereton Diaz did score 7 last season, but you know, there's that wasn't all that impressive considering where he's at now. So, you know, someone like Shea Yojo who could kind of step up. Doorbell goes. Yeah, I think so. I think I think. I'm not 100% sure. I think cashing in on him could be a decent idea, but they need a plan, and they need a contingency plan in place. Otherwise, they might suffer kind of in the short term. But as Ben said, I don't think it'd be the absolute end of the world. So have a plan in place. But and if you get an offer, then a good offer, then I would accept it.
What about you, Ben? You know, do you think Millwall should sell Jed Wallace in the January transfer window?
It's such a tough question. You know, I think if there is offers though in, you know, the region of 5 million or so, like I mentioned earlier, I think I would reluctantly cash in instead of maybe losing for free in the summer. You know, if it's just 1 or 2 million quid that Premier League clubs or other clubs are bidding, then I'd be tempted to keep hold. But, you know, if the offer's right, I think it would be wise to, you know, cash in, reinvest, and look after the future of the club. I mean, it's a very complex situation. We don't know what's going on in his head. We don't know how far things are down the line in terms of contracts. It's gone very quiet and nothing's really been spoke about since, you know, September time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think if the offers are in the ballpark of 5 million, you know, if it was me, I would reluctantly cash in and look to just move on. But it's no doubt, whether it's for 5 million or it's on a free in the summer, it'd be a massive loss to Millwall Football Club.
Absolutely. So Ben and Adam both sort of the opinion that perhaps Millwall should be looking long term if those big offers do come in. Well, that's everything from us on the debate show today. But at 4 p.m, George Douglas is going to be joined by Marcus Alley and Toby Wilding for the Tuesday EFL preview show, and that one is not one to be missed. As I said before, please do like the video on YouTube. It works really well for the algorithms, and of course, subscribe to Football League World TV on YouTube. Ben and Adam, thanks for speaking to me today. It's been a pleasure, and thanks everyone for watching.